They said they couldn't afford to take both of us, so my sister went on a Mediterranean cruise while I stayed home. When they returned, I was gone, so was everything I'd ever paid for in that house. They told me over lunch. Not even a real sit-down dinner like we used to have when I was a kid. Just a half-hearted get-together at that overpriced seafood place they like because it makes them feel classy. Dad had his usual crab cake sandwich. Mom was swirling a glass of wine like she could actually tell the difference between a $5 bottle and the garbage they serve on airplanes. And I sat across from them, sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending I didn't already know something was coming. I could feel it in the way they smiled too much. The way they complimented my new haircut 3 times in 15 minutes, like buttering up a roast before shoving it into the oven. And then Mom just said it so casually I almost didn't catch it. "We wish we could take both of you, but we just can't swing it this time, sweetheart." I blinked. That's it. No lead up, no apology, no guilt in her voice. Just like that, they were dropping this tiny sharp truth on the table between the ketchup bottle and a basket of stale fries. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd chime in, add some warmth, offer something like, "We feel awful, Andy." "Really, we do." But he just gave this tight little smile like it hurt him to even acknowledge the moment. Then Mom added, "We figured Trina could use the break, you know? She's been through a lot lately." And that was when something snapped inside me. Not all at once, not with drama or shouting, but with this slow sinking feeling, like air leaking out of a balloon. Not the fact that they picked her, hell, I should have seen that coming, but that they acted like it was reasonable, like it made perfect sense. Like I, the son who paid their electric bills last winter and fixed their damn garage door with my own 2 hands, should just nod and say, "Of course." I forced a laugh because I didn't trust myself to speak. They kept talking about ports and excursions, about how Trina was excited to see Italy, even though she flunked out of high school history and once asked if Venice was that place with the pyramids. They said this cruise would be good for her. Help her reset. Reset from what exactly? The stress of dating men half her age and never holding down a job longer than 3 months? The trauma of living rent-free in the pool house for a decade? I stirred my coffee and let them prattle on, mentally counting every dollar I'd ever handed over to them in the past 5 years. Every time I said I got it at the grocery store, every tank of gas, every new appliance I ordered and installed while Trina couldn't get around to it. I wish I could say I blew up right there in the restaurant, threw my napkin down, and told them to shove their cruise up their retirement-aged asses, but I didn't. I just smiled tight-lipped and nodded. Let them feel good about themselves for choosing her, for leaving me behind like some spare tire in the trunk of a car they no longer wanted to drive. After lunch, Dad hugged me like he was doing me a favor, like his decision hadn't just punched a hole in my gut. Mom clapped my shoulder and said, "You'll get your turn." I didn't have the energy to ask when exactly that might be. After they're dead and gone? Maybe? When there's nothing left but Trina's empty promises and overdue bills. The next few days passed like a blur. I watched from the window as they loaded their luggage into the back of Trina's borrowed SUV, all smiles and sunscreen and excitement. Samuel, Trina's flavor of the month, wore a giant baseball cap and kissed Dad on the cheek like he belonged, like he had somehow earned a spot on the deck of that cruise ship while I was being left behind to water plants and collect their mail. No one asked me to house sit, not that I would have. They waved as they pulled away, and I waved back. Not because I meant it, but because I wanted to remember that moment forever, the exact second they made their choice. And just like that, they were gone. Let me ask you something. What would you have done? I mean it. If your parents looked you in the eye and told you that you, the dependable one, the one who always showed up, weren't worth the price of a damn plane ticket while your sister, who still owes you money for that busted laptop, gets to sip wine off the coast of Santorini, would you smile and accept it? Or would something in you break a little? Something deep and quiet and final? Because something in me did. Something I didn't even know was still alive. Maybe it had been dying for years, chipped away by every forgotten birthday, every ignored phone call, every dinner where Trina got the big piece of chicken and I got told I was so mature for understanding. But that day, as their car turned the corner and vanished, it wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. Cold, clean, and sharp as glass. They didn't forget me. They chose her. And that, my friend, is a whole different kind of hurt. It's funny how you don't really keep score until you realize the game was never fair to begin with. And once that idea lodges itself in your chest, quietly, without warning, it grows into something unbearable, like an itch you can't scratch, or a stone in your shoe that you try to ignore until you find yourself limping through your own damn life. I spent the days after they left trying not to feel anything. Sweeping the floors, folding laundry, fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen. Not because it mattered anymore, but because that's what I did. That's who I was. The son who took care of things, kept everything running even when no one noticed. Even when no one thanked me, even when I felt like I'd been reduced to background noise in my own family. I walked through that house like a stranger. And it hit me slowly at first, and then like a storm. Every single thing that worked, that functioned, that made their life easy had my name etched into it. Not in pen or paint, but in effort. In hours spent on hold with customer service or bent under the sink with a wrench and a prayer. That new washer and dryer they loved so much? The ones that didn't shake the house like an earthquake? I bought those. The smart thermostat that mom bragged about to her friends, acting like she installed it herself? That was mine. The leather couch where dad fell asleep watching his crime shows? I paid for that, too, down to the delivery fee. And the thing is, I never made a scene about it. Never kept a ledger. Never said, hey, maybe Trina should pitch in for once. Because I thought, stupidly, maybe, that love worked like that. That family was about doing without being asked, about showing up without needing applause. But the cruise changed something. Not the event itself, not the fact that they left, but what it revealed. The raw, undeniable truth that I was never going to be the one they chose first. No matter how much I gave or how long I waited. I started looking at everything differently, as if the walls had finally begun to whisper what I'd refused to hear, that love in this house came with conditions, and I was the only one still paying. So I started digging. Not emotionally, not in therapy, but in paperwork, in accounts, in all the digital and dusty corners of their life where things are supposed to be transparent but never are. And that's when I found it. Hidden in plain sight, a casual betrayal wrapped in financial language. The travel fund, a small investment account they'd opened in both their names years ago, supposedly to use for their dream trips once they retired. I remember the conversation when they told me they had to close it early, that there just wasn't enough left in it to justify keeping it open. They made it sound like it barely had enough to cover dinner at Olive Garden, let alone anything meaningful. But there it was, active and very much funded, not with stock market gains or mysterious windfalls, but with a transfer dated 6 months earlier from an account that used to belong to me. My account, the savings I'd built in my 20s. The one I asked mom to help me manage when I didn't know what a Roth IRA was. The one I forgot about because life got busy, because rent and work and helping them always came first. Turns out she never closed it. She just rerouted the funds. And when I confronted that fact in the cold light of my laptop screen, there was no mistaking the numbers. No gray area left to justify it. They didn't just leave me behind. They used me to get there. I sat with that truth like a weight on my chest, like something that would crush me if I didn't do something, if I didn't move, if I didn't respond. And yet, what could I say? Hey, just checking in from the house you left me in, wondering why my savings paid for your little boat ride through paradise? What would that accomplish? They'd deny it, deflect, tell me I was being dramatic, too sensitive as always. They'd remind me of all the things they did for me once upon a time. Little league games and sack lunches. The roof over my head. As if those things weren't the bare minimum. As if love could be repaid in interest rates and guilt. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked around that house, the one they never called mine, and I saw it for what it really was. A shrine to my silence. A monument to all the ways I'd bent myself into someone convenient, useful, easy to overlook. And in that moment, I realized I didn't want to be him anymore. I didn't want to be the one who waited quietly for his turn, who kept giving in hopes that someone might finally notice. I wanted something else, something I couldn't name yet. But I knew it didn't live inside those walls. And so I started planning. Not revenge, not yet. Just an exit. Just an answer to the question they didn't bother to ask when they boarded that ship. What happens when the one who always stays decides to go? Because believe me, when I left, they weren't going to forget it. There's something deeply liberating, almost terrifyingly so, about the moment you realize you no longer owe anyone an explanation. Not out of spite, not because you suddenly stopped caring, but because you finally accepted the truth you've been choking on for years. The kind that crawls into your bones and rewires the way you see the people you once would have died for. After I found the financial paper trail, after I stared at those transaction logs until the numbers became meaningless, a numbness took over, not cold or bitter, but calm in the way a storm's eye is calm. Silent, deceptively still, yet full of pressure, just waiting to collapse everything around it. I didn't pack a bag right away. I didn't march through the house in a fury, tearing everything apart like some spurned lover in a bad TV movie. No, I took my time because revenge, when done right, isn't loud or sloppy. It's methodical, measured, and terrifying in how quiet it can be. The first thing I did was take inventory. Not emotional inventory, not a checklist of broken memories or childhood slights, but an actual detailed accounting of what in that house I had paid for with my own money, time, and labor. I pulled receipts, emails, old text messages from group chats where I confirmed purchases or forwarded warranty info. Anything that would stand up in the silent courtroom I was building in my head, where the only judge and jury was the version of me that had been ignored for too long. It was shocking, really, how much of their comfort had been built with my hands. The entire living room, mine, down to the side tables and the damn light bulbs and the antique lamp. The kitchen backsplash mom always bragged about being installed by a contractor. I found and paid for after Dad said the old tile was making him depressed. The water heater, bought with my bonus from a job I hated. The same one I stayed in for 3 extra years because I didn't want to leave them without support. So I rented a storage unit, nothing fancy, Nothing that would draw attention. I found one with a loading dock and a freight elevator, paid in cash, and told the guy behind the desk it was for a house transition, which wasn't a lie, not really. Over the course of 3 days, while the cruise ship carrying my parents and Trina floated somewhere between Mykonos and oblivion, I dismantled their world piece by piece. I moved through the house like a ghost, quiet and intentional, wrapping furniture in blankets, unplugging electronics, carefully boxing up every dish, every picture frame, every towel set I'd purchased during one of my many Target runs over the years when no one else could be bothered to care. It wasn't theft. I didn't take what wasn't mine. I left the things that belonged to them, though I'll admit the line between mine and ours got a little blurry the deeper I got into the closets. But I made my peace with that blur because blurred lines were all they ever gave me. I found a document folder labeled Vacation Ideas on their home computer, full of photos of places they planned to go with Trina, notes on wine tastings, spa packages, even a paragraph about retiring to Florida. If Andy ever settles down, one note read. That stung in a way I can't fully describe. Not because I wanted to be in those pictures or plans, but because I realized I never had been. I was a footnote, a contingency plan, the just-in-case son who could be counted on to hold the fort while they chased the dream with someone more exciting. When I finished, the house looked like a model home after a clearance sale. Hollow, echoing, impersonal. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want to give them the dignity of a farewell they never earned. But I left a small detail, a single thread they'd have to pull on. And I did it for me. On the empty mantel where our family photos used to sit, I placed one frame. Inside it was the receipt for the cruise, printed in full color with a yellow sticky note across the top, paid in full by me. I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel anything but the kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from finally drawing a line in the sand after years of letting it be washed away by other people's priorities. I knew the storm would come when they got back, that they'd be furious, confused, desperate for a narrative that made them the victims. But I also knew they'd never be able to spin it in a way that erased the facts. I didn't abandon them. I just took back what was mine and walked away before they could steal anything else from me, including my peace. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about subtraction. Removing yourself from the equation so that others are forced to do the math. And when they finally added it all up, the house, the memories, the cruise, the years, they'd come to the one answer they never expected. Andy was never the problem. He was the glue. And now he's gone. They came back on a Wednesday, probably expecting nothing more complicated than a bit of jet lag, some laundry to unpack, and the usual stream of praise from friends and neighbors eager to hear about their Mediterranean adventure, the wines they sipped, the sunsets they watched, the lazy afternoons they spent lounging on sun-drenched decks while the ocean carried them across postcard scenes. But instead, they stepped into something entirely different. Something hollowed out, silent, and unmistakably altered. The kind of silence that doesn't just greet you at the door, but presses into your lungs and demands acknowledgement. I wasn't there to see it happen, but in my mind I've replayed the moment 100 times. My father's hand reaching for the light switch, only to find the fixture gone. My mother calling out my name as if I'd just misplaced a few things in a fit of forgetfulness rather than strip the house down to the bones with surgical precision. And Trina, the golden girl, the hero of their journey, her standing in the middle of the bare living room, realizing for perhaps the first time in her life that things don't always get handed to you just because you believe you deserve them. The first voicemail came within an hour. Mivadhar's voice trembled with confusion. Not yet panic, but the kind of disbelief that clings to denial like a security blanket. Andy, something's wrong, he said, as if I had merely taken a wrong turn and ended up somewhere unfamiliar. Call us back, please. The house. It's empty. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't demand an explanation. He just said those words, clipped and uncertain, like maybe if he said them aloud they'd make more sense. That's how the grieving starts, isn't it? Not with tears or rage, but with an absence so large it doesn't fit into sentences anymore. Over the next 24 hours, the messages grew more frequent, more erratic. My mother left one, her tone sharp with restrained fury, trying to play the authority figure as if I were 16 again and had stayed out past curfew. You had no right, Andy, she said, the sound of drawers opening and closing in the background, her frustration rising with every breath. This isn't how families deal with things. This is petty, vindictive. You need to come back. I played that one 3 times, not for the message, but for the silence at the end. The part where she expected me to pick up, to be listening, to still be the son who always came when called. But I wasn't. Not anymore. What none of them seemed to understand was that this wasn't an act of vengeance born out of some single moment of rejection or hurt. Not just because they picked Trina for the cruise. Not because they spent my savings. Not because they forgot to say thank you one too many times. But because they had built an entire way of living on the assumption that I would always be there, that I would always play the supporting role while Trina starred in every family story, every holiday, every future plan. They didn't just fail to notice me, they erased me. And I let them for longer than I should have, hoping that someday something would change, that they'd turn around and see me still standing there with open hands and tired eyes. Trina, of course, took a different route. Her messages weren't confused. They were angry, condescending, wrapped in that entitled tone she'd mastered since she was a teenager and first discovered that charming smiles and dramatic sighs could get her out of anything. Seriously, Andy? One of her messages started, the words practically sneering through the phone. You took the couch? Who does that? You're insane. Like actually unstable. You need help. She never mentioned the cruise. She never thanked me for the reset she'd been given at my expense. She just wanted her stuff back. Or rather, the stuff I paid for, maintained, cleaned, and made sure was still there after every one of her little rough patches. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't owe them a response, but I watched. I created a separate account and followed Trina's social media, not because I cared about her selfies or her new business ideas, but because I wanted to see what happened when the scaffolding was pulled away. And it didn't take long. Within 3 days, she was complaining online about freeloaders and fake people who pretend to care. Vague posting like a teenager who got grounded. My father posted a photo of a sunset, captioned, trying to stay positive. And I imagined him sitting in the now empty dining room, staring at the space where the table used to be, the one we had family dinners around back when I still believed that word meant something. By the end of the week, my mother finally cracked. She sent a handwritten letter mailed to my old P.O. box, written in her tidy mechanical script. She didn't apologize. Not really. She talked about misunderstandings, about how families go through things and how she hoped we could find our way back to each other. But even in that, she couldn't help herself. She had to include a paragraph explaining how disruptive it was to come home to an empty house, how they were now scrambling to make things right again. As if the discomfort of the fallout was somehow the real injustice, not the betrayal that caused it. And that's when I realized something truly important. Something I should have known all along, but had been too tired, too loyal, too damned hopeful to admit. They weren't sorry. Not for what they did, not for how they treated me. They were sorry it caught up with them. They were sorry they lost their things, their comfort, their illusion that everything would always be the same, no matter how cruel or dismissive they were. They wanted the clock turned back, not because they missed me, but because they missed the version of me that didn't fight back. I didn't mail a reply. I didn't explain or justify. I didn't answer any calls. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't scream or curse or demand to be heard. Sometimes it's simply refusing to go back to the place where you were never truly seen and letting the silence speak for you. It's strange the way life continues after something irrevocable, as if nothing happened. As if the world doesn't pause to acknowledge the shifting of your center of gravity. And for a while I kept waiting for some seismic aftershock to ripple through the rest of my life, some moment where I'd be forced to defend what I'd done. To justify walking away from the people who raised me, who fed me, who put band-aids on my scraped knees and sent me off to school with carefully packed lunches that at the time I didn't realize were conditional offerings of love. But no such reckoning ever came. And in that silence, I began to understand that real change doesn't always come with applause or confrontation. Sometimes it just comes with distance, deliberate and cold and cleansing in a way that only those who've lived in emotional debt truly understand. After I left, I moved with purpose, but not haste, choosing a small town 3 states away. Not so remote that I'd vanish completely, but just quiet enough to make the absence undeniable to anyone still looking for me in the old places. I found a modest rental with peeling paint and a creaky porch swing. A space that felt nothing like the polished suburban showcase I'd helped maintain for over a decade. But every inch of it was mine. Truly mine. Even the things that didn't work right, even the unpatched corners and crooked light fixtures, because they represented a reality I'd built on my own terms. Flawed, yes, but honest. There was no one to tell me the curtains didn't match or that the fridge was too loud. The silence was mine, too. And I reveled in it like a luxury I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Weeks passed, then months. I changed my number, closed my shared accounts, left the house keys in a sealed envelope at the foot of their old mailbox with a sticky note that read simply, "You might want to call a locksmith." It wasn't dramatic, but it was deliberate. Like everything else I'd done since they left me behind for that cruise. And still, every so often, a ripple from the past found its way to me. A shared acquaintance forwarding me a text Trina had blasted to the extended family, framing me as unwell and emotionally unstable, peppered with just enough half-truths to make it feel plausible to those who never really knew me. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sending a polite, cautious message asking if I was okay, clearly hoping I wouldn't actually reply and make it her problem. I ignored them all, not because I had nothing to say, but because I no longer needed them to hear it. They weren't the audience I had left behind. They were just the echo chamber I had outgrown. The real moment of reckoning came not with a phone call or a confrontation, but in a photograph I stumbled across online purely by accident. One of those real estate listings you don't mean to find, but suddenly can't stop staring at. There it was, the house I'd emptied, now back on the market. The photo showed it refurnished, awkwardly so, like they'd rushed to make it look lived in again to erase the ghost I'd left behind. The caption read, a charming home full of character, ready for new beginnings. And I laughed, not out of bitterness, but out of disbelief at how neatly the world tries to tie things up for the sake of appearances. I don't know what hurt more, seeing that house listed like it had never been mine, or realizing that in some ways it never really had been. It was just a set piece I kept clean for a play I was never allowed to star in. And now it was being passed along to someone new, someone unsuspecting, someone who wouldn't know that the dining room used to echo with passive-aggressive silence, or that the hallway closet still held the scent of old guilt and forgotten birthdays. Trina, from what little I've gathered, hasn't changed. She tried to launch a business, something vague involving consulting, and it fizzled out in less than 2 months, after which she posted a bitter thread about how some people just don't get support like others do, as if the irony of that statement wasn't slapping her square in the face. My parents, now living in a smaller place with beige carpeting and outdated appliances, seemed to be attempting the quiet life, pretending perhaps that they downsized by choice and not necessity, that the walls around them aren't a daily reminder of what they lost when they stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a convenience. I sometimes wonder if they sit around that new living room and talk about me. I wonder if they try to rewrite the story in their favor, painting me as the unstable one, the ungrateful son who walked away without warning, without mercy. Maybe they say I snapped, that I was always sensitive, that they should have seen it coming, that they did their best. Maybe on the worst days, they allow themselves to ask the real questions. What did we do? When did he start drifting? Why didn't we see it? But I don't hold my breath for those moments. I've stopped expecting clarity from people who can't look past their own comfort. Still, I check in now and then, not directly, not openly, but in the way you might glance at an old scar just to remind yourself that the wound did in fact exist. I watch from a distance as they adjust to the life they built without me. And in the quiet of my new apartment, surrounded by second-hand furniture and plants I've learned to keep alive, I feel something close to peace. Not the fairy tale kind, not the resolution you see in movies where everyone hugs and cries and makes up over pie, but the real kind, the quiet acceptance that not everything broken can be fixed. And not every family deserves a reunion. Because the truth is, they didn't just lose a son. They lost the part of their life that held everything together. That paid the bills without being asked. That showed up when no one else did. That smiled politely while being ignored. And while they float in their own sea of denial, still clinging to the myth of their own generosity, I live in the truth that sometimes the most powerful kind of payback isn't fire or fury, but absence. And absence, when it's earned, is louder than any door slam, sharper than any goodbye, and far more permanent than any apology that never arrives lives.